There was once a small village resting quietly between open fields and dusty paths. Nothing remarkable seemed to happen there. The days moved slowly, like clouds drifting across a wide sky. People woke with the sun, worked with their hands, spoke loudly in the markets, and returned home before the evening wind grew cold. Among them lived a poor farmer. Most people knew him only in passing. They saw him walking along the narrow road with simple clothes that had been worn thin by many seasons. His steps were slow, unhurried. His eyes rarely lifted toward the crowd. He did not speak much. In a place where voices often filled the air, his silence felt unusual. Some believed it meant he had little to say. Others assumed it meant he had little to understand. But the farmer never seemed bothered by what they believed. Each morning he walked to his small piece of land. The soil there was not rich. The ground was stubborn and dry in many places. Yet he worked it patiently, turning the earth with quiet determination, as though he were having a conversation with the soil itself. And when the wind passed through the tall grass, he would pause, just for a moment, as if listening. Sometimes, people from the village would pass by on the road nearby. They would see him there, standing quietly, his hands resting on the handle of his tools, watching the sky, watching the earth. They often wondered about him. Why did he speak so little? Why did he seem so calm when life had given him so little comfort? Most people believed that a man who owned so little must carry a heavy sadness inside. They believed silence was the weight of disappointment, the quiet of someone who had lost. But when they looked closely, something did not quite fit that story. The farmer's face was not tense. His shoulders did not carry the tightness of anger. His eyes did not wander with restless worry. Instead, there was a strange steadiness in him, a kind of stillness. It was the stillness of someone who did not feel the need to rush, someone who did not feel the need to fill every moment with words. And in a village where people often spoke quickly and judged quickly, this kind of quiet presence felt difficult to understand. So many simply ignored him. They walked past him without greeting. They whispered small things to each other when he was near. A poor man, they would think, a quiet man, perhaps a man with nothing important inside him. Yet the farmer continued living the same way. Day after day, he woke with the same quiet rhythm. He worked the land with the same patience. And when the sun slowly sank behind the distant hills, he gathered his tools and walked back along the same narrow road, never rushing, never complaining. Sometimes, when the evening sky turned soft and golden, he would stop for a moment and look across the fields. No one knew what he was thinking during those moments. Was he remembering something? Was he waiting for something? Or was he simply enjoying the quiet that most people were too busy to notice? It is a strange thing about silence. To some, it feels empty. To others, it feels uncomfortable. But sometimes, silence is not emptiness at all. Sometimes it is a place where a person learns to stand without needing the noise of the world. and the farmer seemed to know something about that place, even if no one else could see it yet. So the village continued its busy life, full of voices, opinions, and quick judgments. And the poor farmer continued his quiet walk between the fields, carrying something within him that most people had never taken the time to understand. As the seasons slowly turned, the village continued to watch the farmer in the quiet way people observe what they do not understand. At first, their attention was small, almost careless. A glance as they passed by. A whisper between two voices. A short laugh carried away by the wind. They noticed the worn fabric of his clothes. They noticed the quiet way he walked with his head slightly lowered. They noticed that he rarely answered when people spoke sharply in his direction. And slowly, a quiet game began to grow in their hearts. A few words here, a careless comment there. Nothing too heavy at first, just enough to test the stillness they saw in him. One afternoon, as the sun stood high and bright above the road, a small group passed by the farmer while he worked the soil. They watched him for a moment. His hands moved slowly through the dry earth. His breathing was steady. The sound of metal touching soil repeated again and again, calm and patient. One of them spoke loudly enough for him to hear. "How strange," the voice said with a laugh. "A man works all day and still has nothing." Another voice joined in. "Maybe he enjoys talking to the dirt more than people." Soft laughter followed. The farmer heard every word. The wind carried those voices clearly across the small field. For a moment, his hands stopped. The tool rested quietly against the ground. Anyone watching might have thought he would turn, that he would answer, that he would defend himself, even with just a few sharp words. After all, when people are mocked, something inside them often rises quickly, like fire catching dry wood. The desire to explain, the desire to argue, the desire to prove that the judgment is wrong. But the farmer did not turn. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood there for a moment, feeling the air move gently across the field. Then slowly he returned to his work. The metal touched the earth again, once, twice, as if nothing had happened at all. The voices on the road faded into the distance, but the quiet reaction remained behind like a question floating in the air. Why did he not answer? Did the words not hurt him? Or did he simply choose not to carry them? Days passed, and the pattern continued. Some people spoke carelessly when he walked by. Some laughed quietly behind their hands. Others looked at him with a kind of puzzled curiosity. It became almost expected. If someone wanted to stir a reaction, the silent farmer was an easy target. And yet, the reaction never came. Not anger, not defense, not even bitterness. Just the same calm silence. Sometimes he would look toward them briefly, not with resentment, not with fear, but with a calm gaze that seemed to pass through the moment without holding on to it. Then he would continue walking, continue working, continue living. For many people, this silence felt uncomfortable. It is easy to understand loud anger. It is easy to understand sharp words. Those things are familiar. But silence, real silence, can feel like a mirror. It reflects something back. It asks a quiet question. Why are these words being thrown? What are they really searching for? Perhaps that is why the whispers slowly grew sharper. If a small stone thrown into water makes no splash, some people begin to throw larger stones just to see the ripples. But the farmer's silence remained the same, steady, unmoved. And though the villagers believed they were testing his weakness, something deeper was quietly being revealed. Something they had not yet learned to recognize. Because sometimes the person who refuses to react is not empty at all. Sometimes that silence is a wall strong enough to stop the noise of the world from entering the heart. But few people notice that at first. They only see the quiet man in worn clothes, standing alone in a dusty field, and they continue to speak, never realizing that their words are slowly teaching a lesson they themselves have not yet understood. Time has a quiet way of revealing what noise cannot. Days moved forward. The sun rose, the wind shifted, and the farmer continued the same patient rhythm that had always shaped his life. His hands touched the soil each morning. His steps followed the narrow paths through the fields. His silence remained as steady as the distant hills that watched over the village. And the words from others continued to arrive. Some were careless, some were sharper. Some carried the small pride people sometimes feel when they believe they have found someone weaker than themselves, yet the farmer did not answer them. At first, many believed this meant the words had no effect on him. They assumed his silence was simple, empty, perhaps even foolish. But silence is rarely what it appears to be. Inside the farmer, something quiet had been growing for many years, something that could not be easily shaken by passing voices. He understood something about words. Words are light when they are spoken, but heavy when they are carried. And many people carry far too many of them. An insult heard in the morning becomes anger by noon. By evening, it turns into a story repeated again and again, until the heart grows tired from holding it. But the farmer seemed to know another way. When a word reached him, he did not immediately grab it. He did not hold it close. He allowed it to pass through the air like a dry leaf carried by the wind. And when you do not hold a leaf, it cannot weigh down your hands. Of course, he heard the voices clearly. He heard the laughter drifting from the road. He heard the quiet comments meant to stir a reaction. There were moments when his chest felt tight for a brief second, moments when a small sting passed through him, the way a thorn lightly touches the skin. He was human, but he had learned something important about those moments. The first feeling arrives quickly, but what comes next is a choice. A person can feed that feeling, turn it into anger, turn it into words thrown back with greater force. Or a person can watch the feeling quietly, the way one watches a passing cloud. And slowly, the cloud moves away. The farmer had practiced this quiet watching for many years, not because he wished to appear strong, not because he wished to defeat anyone with silence, but because he had once discovered how peaceful life could feel when the heart was not crowded with unnecessary battles. Every argument asks for energy. Every reaction demands attention, and attention once given is difficult to take back. So the farmer protected his attention carefully. When voices rose around him, he listened for a moment, then returned his focus to the soil beneath his hands, to the wind moving across the field, to the simple work that waited patiently in front of him. The earth did not insult him. The sky did not judge him. And the quiet work of planting and tending gave him something many others in the village had slowly lost: a calm center. Sometimes, when people spoke harshly near him, he would look at them for a brief moment, not with anger, not with shame, but with a kind of quiet understanding, as if he saw something they themselves had not noticed, because often the loudest voices carry the heaviest unrest. A peaceful heart rarely needs to shout, yet those who mocked him did not see this. They only saw a man who refused to fight back. They believed they were witnessing weakness, but they did not realize that restraint is not the absence of strength. Sometimes it is the purest form of it. To hold back a reaction when the world expects one, that requires a deep kind of discipline. The kind that grows slowly, like roots beneath the soil, invisible at first, but strong enough one day to hold an entire tree steady through the storm. And while the village continued speaking, laughing, and judging as it always had, the farmer continued building those quiet roots inside himself, roots that no careless word could easily disturb. Seasons passed quietly over the village. The dry winds came and went. The fields changed their colors with time. Some harvests were generous, others were small. Life moved forward the way it always does, slowly, patiently, without announcing its lessons, and through all of it, the farmer remained the same calm walk along the dusty path, the same quiet work in the soil, the same silence that many people had once mistaken for weakness. But something else had begun to change, not inside the farmer, but inside the eyes of those who watched him. Little by little, people started noticing things they had not paid attention to before. They noticed that while others often argued loudly in the streets, the farmer's days passed without conflict. They noticed that while many people carried heavy worry on their faces, his expression remained calm, almost untouched by the noise around him. And they noticed something even more unusual. The insults that had once been thrown so easily toward him were slowly disappearing. Not because he had fought back, not because he had demanded respect, but because his silence had done something unexpected. It had quietly removed the game. When a person throws a stone and waits for it to be thrown back, the moment becomes a contest. A spark becomes a fire. But when the stone falls into still water and nothing returns, the thrower is left alone with the sound of the splash. And after enough time passes, the hand grows tired of throwing. The villagers began to feel this without quite understanding it. Their laughter, once sharp and careless, began to sound smaller when it met the farmer's quiet presence. The words that once felt amusing began to feel unnecessary. Some people started greeting him with a small nod as they passed. Others simply walked by in silence. And though the farmer noticed these small changes, he did not treat them as a victory. He did not look for apologies. He did not remind anyone of the past. He simply continued living the same way he always had, because his silence had never been meant to teach others. It had only been meant to protect his own peace. One evening, as the sun slowly lowered itself behind the distant hills, the farmer finished his work and stood for a moment at the edge of his field. The air was soft and cool. The sky carried quiet colors that spread gently across the horizon. In the distance, the village moved through its usual evening rhythm. Faint voices drifted through the air, softer now than they once had been. The farmer rested his hands on the handle of his tool and looked across the land. There was no pride in his face, no sense of proving anything, only a deep, quiet calm, because he had learned something simple. Something that many people spend their entire lives chasing without ever quite finding. Not every voice deserves an answer. Not every opinion deserves space inside the heart. Sometimes the strongest response is not a word, but the quiet decision to remain still, to let the noise pass, to allow time to reveal what arguments never can. The farmer gathered his tools and began walking back along the narrow road. His steps were slow, just as they had always been. The evening wind moved gently through the tall grass beside the path. And as he walked, the village behind him felt quieter than it once had. Perhaps the people had begun to learn something. Or perhaps they had simply grown tired of speaking into silence. But the farmer did not spend much time thinking about that. His peace had never depended on their understanding. It had grown quietly inside him long ago, like roots deep beneath the soil. Roots that needed no praise, no defense, no reaction. Only the quiet strength of a heart that knows when silence is enough.